President calls on the Malaysian Prime Minister. 5 bilateral agreements inked. Namal Rajapaksa grilled again by the FCID. Minister Lakshman Senamiratne clears his stance on the consensual government. Presidential powers of impunity to be vested in the Prime Minister through the Super Ministry. Statement from Bimal Weerawangsa.
මේක තරම් ඒකාධිපති පනතක් මේ රටේ ආර්ථිකයේ සමස්තය අතට අරගෙන ජනාධිපතිට විතරක් තියෙන මුක්තිය කොහොමද අගමැති වෙන්නේ මේක හරහා?
A very good evening to you. You are watching Prime Time News on Newsfirst. I am Chaturanga Hapuarachi with my co-anchor Rakhna Farooq. Good evening to you, Rakhna. How are you doing?
Good evening, Chaturanga. I'm doing great.
Hope our viewers are feeling great too.
Indeed. Let's start off with a look at your top story for tonight. The official meeting between visiting President Maithripala Sirisena and Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak took place today.
The meeting at the Malaysian Prime Minister's office took place as part of the President's official visit to Malaysia. President Sirisena was accorded a military guard of honor prior to the meeting. Prime Minister Razak had mentioned Malaysia's readiness to invest in many spheres in Sri Lanka. Both the countries inked 5 bilateral agreements as well. President Sirisena reaffirmed that Sri Lanka aims to foster reconciliation and develop the economy.
Matters of exchange in the technical and technology sector, the tourism sector and youth affairs were discussed under these 5 bilateral agreements. The President expressed his gratitude to the Malaysian Prime Minister for investments and trade done with Sri Lanka. The Malaysian Prime Minister also praised the new government's program and said that his country would support the journey in achieving reconciliation through a consensual government. The President invited Malaysia to continue investments in Sri Lanka, adding that there is opportunity to identify new investment opportunities and develop the existing investments. The President also invited the Prime Minister to visit Sri Lanka early next year to continue bilateral talks.
A special cultural and food festival took place in Kuala Lumpur last evening to celebrate 60 years of diplomatic relations between Sri Lanka and Malaysia.
For the hotel and the country.
Farmers warn that the country is heading towards an inevitable crisis centering rice.
Arid weather and issues surrounding fertilizer have led to a situation where the expected harvest of the Maha season cannot be reaped. There is a risk that the harvest of this year's Maha season would be half of what was reaped last year.
වැපුරුවේ වැස්ස ලැබේ කියලා විශාල බලාපොරොත්තුවකින් අන්තිමට පිට වෙලෙන්දු ඇවිල්ලා අපෙන් තුට්ටු දෙකට වී කිලෝ එක 28ට 25ට තමයි මයින්නේ එල් පොර ගහ ගන්නත් විදියක් නෑ මොකද පොර සල්ලි තාම රජයෙන් අපට දීලත් නෑ මේ නාස්තින කුඹුර වලටත් එක්ක රජයෙන් සහනාධාරයක් හරි ලබා දෙන්න කටයුතු කරලා දෙන්න කියලා ඉල්ලමින් වගා කරලා තිබෙන හෙක්ටයාර
There is sufficient water for only 4,000 hectares of paddy land, while 9,000 hectares have been cultivated. There is a risk of a portion of that being destroyed as well. If sufficient rainfall is not received, the remaining farmlands will be destroyed.
Sri Lanka receives less rainfall in January and February. Even if there is rainfall, there is no solution to the scarcity of water.
In areas like Polonnaruwa, Anuradhapura and Hambantota, where a better harvest is expected, cultivations during the Maha season have been limited. Of the 190,000 acres of paddy land in the Kurunegala district, a mere 19,000 acres have been cultivated. However, over in the Ampara district, over 90% of the 800,000 acres of paddy lands have been cultivated this time around.
අඩු ගානේ කුඹුරු වගා කරපු කුඹුරු වලින්
Were the farmers provided fertilizer on time in order to yield a successful harvest? Fertilizer is required within 45 days. Under this situation, the harvest will be significantly lower. Has the government been successful in controlling the price of rice?
ආණ්ඩුව සමත්ද මේ සහල් මිල පාලනය කරන්න.
මේ වෙනකොටම නාඩු හාල් පිටරටින් ගෙන්නීම
LCs have been given to the private sector to import Nadu rice. The Paddy Marketing Board has made a decision to release paddy stocks from this week. We will have positive news for the consumers by next week. The prices of rice will reduce. Since rice will be imported from neighbouring countries like India, the process will not take long. Come the festive season, the prices will reduce.
දකින්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියන එක තමයි අපේ විශ්වාසය.
හාල් මෙහි ගෙනල්ලා ගොඩ ගැහුවට පස්සේ
When they import and store this rice, the paddy price will drop. Then again, the intermediaries and the large mills will purchase the farmers' paddy for a lesser price. A rice shortage will be created. The consumers will be extorted. The government must be ashamed that when 3 private mills possess 1 million tons of paddy, the government only has 200,000 metric tons. They decide on everything based on their cut.
තීරණය කරන්නේ tamunට ලැබෙන කොමිස් කොට්ටියේ ප්‍රමාණය අනුව.
Many issues were raised in Parliament during the budget debate on the super ministry. Let's have a listen to some of the views that were expressed on this.
දැන් මේ පනතෙන් මොකද්ද කරන්නේ මේ අලුත්
Under this new act, you cannot take legal action against this new minister and the persons employed at the respective institutions. Even if it's a civil case and the officer is found guilty, compensation will be paid by the government and not by the guilty individual. This is an authoritarian act. How can the Prime Minister take the entire economy into his grasp and use the powers of the President?
තියෙන මුක්තිය කොහොමද අගමැති වෙන්නේ මේක හරහා? අර හෝකන්
Can you tell us about the death of a 20-year-old boy in the Hokan of the palace?
කුමන්ත්‍රණය ගැන පොඩ්ඩක්
අදාළ නැහැ.
ඔබතුමාගේ
It is reported that the question you raised is for your own pleasure. The OIC of the Thalangama police and the head of the crimes division, as well as another officer, have been transferred. An associate of Sujiva has been placed in the police to ensure that the investigations are steered in a path preferred by them.
වෙන මොකටවත් නෙවෙයි. ඒ පරීක්ෂණය Tamanට වාසිදායක විදියකට අසුරවන්න පුළුවන්ද කියලා බලන්න.
අපි මෙතුමා වගේ
We will not stoop to low levels where we resort to changing the positions of police officers. But since my name was mentioned, I will ask, was that 24-year-old killed or killed by someone? Please answer us.
It's your government and your police. If we evade arrest for murder, what are you doing? What are the bond scammers doing? They are purchasing media institutions, television stations and newspapers. They are trying to control the mandate of the people using the very funds extorted from the people. They are attempting to enhance the image of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe.
There is a delay in enforcing the law. We will expedite the enforcement of the law and act against those wrongdoers of the past. The majority speaks of the top 10. We speak of the top 100.
We are waiting for the Prime Minister to file a case against his friend. They are starting a newspaper and a television station from those funds. We ask the journalists of that newspaper, do they have no shame? They are trying to use the media to steer the country in a different direction.
Court ordered today that MP Vimal Weerawansa be summoned to the Police Financial Crimes Investigation Division on the 28th and 29th of this month in order to obtain a statement.
The order was issued today by Fort Magistrate Lanka after it was informed that the parliamentarian has not provided his assistance towards investigations. Facts were presented when the case pertaining to the misappropriation of vehicles belonging to the Presidential Secretariat was taken up today. Meanwhile, MP Namal Rajapaksa was summoned to the FCID to obtain a statement regarding the manner in which assets were acquired for the Hello Corp and Gauza companies said to be owned by the parliamentarian.
I do not have a girlfriend. If there is someone like that, please find her for me. However, Ravi Karunanayake made a phone call to the IGP and spoke at a media briefing. Now, if you talk about the IGP's independence, he gives instructions to ministers regarding how to sling mud at the children of parliamentarians. How independent is this? That phone is going to be the cause of his downfall. I would like to say to those ministers, do not sling mud at the children when they cross the white line. Instead, impose fines.
දරුවා ගැන හොයනවා. සුදු ඉර කපල එලවන් ගිහපු.
They are not investigating the bond scam which caused a loss of 145 billion rupees. 37 individuals were killed in November alone. The IGP is not looking into those things. The IGP is only looking into whether the children of parliamentarians are crossing the white line.
ඒව ගැන පොලිස්පතිවරයා හොයන්නේ නැහැ. මන්ත්‍රීවරුන්ගේ ළමයි සුදු ඉර කපන ඒවා තමයි මේ පොලිස්පති හොයන්නේ. හරි ෂෝ.
The following are the views expressed by the Deputy Minister of Transport in reply to comments made by the former President with regard to the Hambantota port.
Now the whole country saw the two ships anchored at the port. When those two ships departed, another two arrived, and they call it a white elephant. During our time, there used to be 24 flights a week. However, they reduced that to 1 flight a week. They portrayed it as a loss-making asset and then transferred it to the Paddy Marketing Board in order to insult us. They are doing this because I made it. The port was built at a cost of 144.1 billion. As of today, the cumulative loss is 40 billion. The annual loss is 8 billion. How can we sustain this? The only way is to start a public-private partnership. That way we do not need to pay the loans. They will furnish the loans by paying 150 billion. The land is ours, so they will pay us a fee. This is a collaboration between the governments of Sri Lanka and China. Therefore, we do not need to pay back the loan. Last November, we paid the first installment for the Matale airport. The monthly fee was 300 million. That is an annual figure of 3,600 million. The total amount that is required to be paid is 8 times that figure. But how much is the income? Only 3 million. How is this sustainable? The contractor who built the port was instructed to build a cricket stadium. That cost 5.02 billion. That loan too has not been paid. They are on contract basis. They were first hired as trainees with the option of making them permanent later. But when the government was defeated, there was no way to make them permanent. See the percentage ratio. It's 80 to 20. They could have made it 50 to 50 or 49-51. They could have kept control of this. But when our resources are handed over to other countries, what will remain for our children to use? They kept a ship in port by force. We now have to pay $400,000 because of that. We do not know how much the other shipping line will demand. When such acts are committed, the sustenance of the country's economy becomes a huge issue to the government.
Speaking at an event held to commemorate the laying of the foundation stone for the 68th Udagambana project in Hambantota, Minister Sajith Premadasa expressed the following views.
They are now spinning a new set of stories about the Hambantota port. A particular individual keeps saying that if he becomes the leader of this country again, he will definitely employ the Hambantota port workers through the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Now that is a joke. The constitution of the country has now been amended. A president who has completed 2 terms in office cannot try for another term in office. That is the present situation. I think he spoke without knowing the proper facts. The model village, consisting of 25 houses, has been named Senpati Pussadevagama.
During the media briefing that was convened by the joint opposition, MP Dallas Ala Peruma broke into poem and song.
One of the promises of the August 18th UNP manifesto was that transactions would be done in accordance with tender procedures. That is why persons like Professor Sarath Vijay Surya and others came forward and made a pledge. This is not the first incident. Expressways and other projects are being done without following a tender process. Based on the information we have, the estimate for the Hambantota port is $2.5 billion. But it is being given for $1.1 billion without calling for a tender.
අම්මන දනන් කෑ ගැසුවත් හතර වටේ ඒවා නොවික්කොත් අපි හැම මකර කටේ
If the government needs a hint on the Kankasanture port, Palali airport and the oil tanks, this song by Nanda Malini will give them some tips.
නන්දා මාලිනීගේ ගීතය හරහාම එතුමිය ඔත්තුව දෙනවා දලදා මැදුර අධිකව මිල කළ හැකිය සිරිමා බෝධියේ ලන්සුව පැහැදිලිය කළුගල් වලට විකුණාගෙන සීගිරිය සීගිරි කුරුටු ගී බයිලා කළ හැකිය ඔන්න ආණ්ඩුවට හොඳ ඔත්තුවක් හෝටන් තැන්න දී ක්‍රීඩා පිටියකට පවරා සිංහ රාජ්‍ය ලී මෝලකට දුම්හිඳ ඇල්ල හරවා ජල විදුලියට සමනල කන්ද බදු දෙමු හෝටලයකට ආණ්ඩුවට හොඳ ඔත්තුවක්.
State Minister Lakshman Seneviratne was questioned by journalists regarding the current political situation at an event held in Colombo today.
The joint opposition says that it is the final month of this government. Why is that? It is like the fox who went behind the goat. Similarly, this government will not fall apart. We are going through hard times, that is true. But like in a marriage, you will not get a divorce for the slightest difficulty. Even if it is problems with the mother-in-law, you will somehow persevere. These stories have been spread by people filled with anguish. When will the super ministry be created? Don't worry. The super ministry has been blown out of proportion in the country. The act is yet to be passed. If it is inappropriate, it will not be passed in parliament. The public claims that the privileges of the ministers are increasing rapidly. The ministers too have questions of their own. Likewise, each person will have their questions, but we need to manage these questions. How long will the marriage last? The plan is not to break the marriage, but to fix the shortcomings as we move forward. But if it comes to that point, then there is nothing that can be done.
A national newspaper carried an article regarding the Secretary of the Ministry of Education lodging a complaint with the President saying that there is an ongoing racket to distribute school uniform material by Salusala without the proper approval of the ministry. According to this newspaper article, the Ministry Secretary has provided this written complaint to the Presidential Secretary. The paper quoting the written complaint says that since there is information that has come to light that Salusala, its officials and other connected parties have used a letter of the Ministry of Education fraudulently and are engaged in this uniform material racket, the Secretary of the Ministry of Education has asked the President to initiate legal action regarding the matter. If the Secretary to the Ministry of Education has written such a letter to the President, it can be considered as a contradictory act. If Salusala or any other institution is carrying out a racket with regard to school uniform material, the Ministry Secretary should have taken expeditious actions about it before the 2nd of this month, which was the last day of the 3rd academic term. The coupons to distribute school uniform material were distributed to students starting from the last week of November. If Salusala or any other institution is selling school uniform materials to students, they could have only done so until the 2nd of December. The letter that, as per the paper article, has been used fraudulently by Salusala and other institutions could be the letter that was written by the Secretary of the Ministry of Education and sent to all principals as well as zonal and provincial education directors on the 26th of September. Action TV on the 26th of November pointed out that the Ministry of Education is attempting to carry out a uniform material racket based on the fact that Cabinet decided that Salusala was an organisation that has suffered a premature death 13 days before this letter was sent out. This letter says that the Salusala Corporation would be arriving at schools and will be selling school uniform material at competitive rates, and that active participation should be given to this activity. The Secretary of the Ministry of Education has not sent any notification that would suggest that the initial letter sent by him close to 2 months ago is not valid. This goes on to show that the Secretary himself has aided in the so-called school uniform material racket. On the 28th of November, the Ceylon Teachers Union lodged a complaint at the Anti-Corruption Committee Secretariat that the letter sent by the Secretary paves the way for corruption. The preliminary report compiled by the Anti-Corruption Secretariat regarding the complaint that was lodged is now in the hands of the Attorney General.
The problem we have is that the minister is silent about this. What we can see is that the Minister of Education has not made any statement about this. We know that the anti-corruption unit has concluded the preliminary investigations. We hope that they take very stern action regarding this, because this has taken place in a backdrop where the government has spent 2,300 million for the students' uniforms.
The role of the Secretary to the Ministry of Industry and Commerce with regard to the school uniform racket to be revealed on Action TV tomorrow.
A number of issues in the Pita village in Yatiantota, Kegol were solved today.
Pitawa is a village located in the Yatiantota divisional secretariat area in Kegol and was severely inconvenienced for many years due to the absence of a drinking water project. This village lacks many of the basic infrastructure facilities that we take for granted on a daily basis. This has led to numerous health concerns among the locals. Newsfirst, which did not turn a blind eye to the issues of these people, intervened to solve their issues with the assistance of the Small Hydropower Developers Association. The program to bring relief to the people continues.
Here's a look at other key judicial proceedings of the day.
Colombo High Court Judge Manilal Vaidyatilaka decided to probe the evidence recorded on the case pertaining to the assassination of late MP Nadaraja Raviraj continuously, starting today until the 4th of January during court vacation which commenced today. The judge pointed out that as the case commenced as a special court proceeding before a special jury, continuously probing the evidence was legal. Evidence on the case will be probed on Monday starting at 9:45 a.m. and will end in the evening. The Colombo District Court decided to extend the interim order preventing the liquidation of Rakna Arakshaka Lanka Private Limited until the 30th of this month. The interim order was extended after a case was filed by Avantgarde. Avantgarde says that as they have inked an agreement with Rakna Arakshaka Lanka, there would be a financial loss if the company was liquidated. Sri Lanka's former ambassador to the United States, Jalia Wickramasuriya's request for bail was turned down by Fort Magistrate Lanka Jayaratna. Defence attorneys made the request for bail citing that their client was not in good health. However, the magistrate said that his health condition was not a special reason to grant bail. She ordered that he be remanded further until the 23rd of December. Court today turned down the request to travel overseas made by former General Secretary of the United National Party, Thissatta Nayaka. Colombo High Court Judge Sarojini Kusala Veeravardhana said that the request was not made as a matter of urgency. Thissatta Nayaka had made a request to travel to Australia from the 25th of December to the 13th of January in order to visit his daughter who is studying there.
I sought permission to visit my daughter as I have not seen her for 6 to 7 months. She is studying in Australia and it is a break period for her. Her brother has not seen her in over a year. That is why I made the request and I am surprised that it was turned down. All others were given permission.
You are with News First. A public forum was convened by the Bar Association of Sri Lanka to discuss the appointment of subcommittees in Parliament to form a new constitution.
Another proposal of the subcommittee is the establishment of a constitutional court. The constitutional court to be outside the hierarchy of the present court of the proposed court structure. The constitutional court will exercise powers in relation to the interpretation of the constitution, review of bills, laws and statutes, the centre-provincial relationships, breach of parliamentary privilege, and of course reviewing its own judgments. Now, the composition of the Constitutional Court, it has been proposed by the subcommittee. It should consist of either of distinguished judges, legal practitioners, or legal academics with special knowledge of constitutional law, and they should hold office for a 5-year term, which would not be renewed. And the appointments to the Constitutional Court would be by the President on the recommendation of the Constitutional Council. And that there should not be a separate court to exercising the powers of a Constitutional Court. Thirdly, the subcommittee proposes that there should be a Supreme Court which should consist of 15 judges and a Court of Appeal which would consist of 40 judges. The Court of Appeal will effectively replace the present high courts, the civil appellate high courts and the provincial high courts. You will have the Court of Appeal sitting in Colombo as well as in the provinces. So you would have one Court of Appeal, but there would be divisions sitting in Colombo, there would be divisions sitting in the provinces, and importantly, the fundamental rights jurisdiction of the Supreme Court would be exercised by the Court of Appeal. So the fundamental rights jurisdiction would be exercised by the Court of Appeal, which will sit in Colombo or in the respective provinces.
The 50th Annual General Meeting of the International Chamber of Commerce Sri Lanka was held last evening.
A number of distinguished personalities from the public and the private sector, including members of the diplomatic mission, were present at the event. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe graced the occasion as a chief guest, with Deputy Minister of Public Enterprise Development Eram Wickremaratne the guest of honour.
If you have been following the events of the last couple of days, and I'm referring here specifically to the events in the Hambantota port, I might right at the outside say it's totally unacceptable. A new government takes over on the 8th of January 2015, and you have a choice when you have these white elephants, either to bury them or basically to write off the investment and go for marginal returns in terms of marginal incomes. So we decide to continue, we decide to keep all the employees, we decide to pay those employees out of the tax monies that are received by government, we continue to pay the debts out of tax revenues received by government, and then you have politicians who basically stir up employees to take hostage of 2 ships, which is totally unacceptable. What is the message that such actions send? The message that such actions send is that Sri Lankan business is indisciplined, that we do not really want foreign investment, and that foreigners are unwelcome here. Without discipline and governance, no country will progress. And therefore, those who have been elected to govern must govern. And I think that is the clear message.
India has signed agreements with Sri Lanka, Finland, Spain and 3 other countries whereby airlines from those nations can operate unlimited number of flights to 6 Indian metro airports. Terming the pact as Open Skies Agreement as per the National Civil Aviation Policy 2016, the Indian Civil Aviation Ministry said the new arrangement would encourage connectivity and passenger travel between India and these countries.
And with that, we wrap up the primetime news for tonight. For the News First team, I'm Rahna Farooq.
I'm Chaturanga Hapuaraji. Have a great weekend ahead of you.